Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Today, folks, we have Andy Pauline, Lavrans Lovely, and Ben Reason with us, and they are going to talk to you about service design, designing cross-channel service experiences. A little background on each of our presenters. Andy is a lecturer and research fellow in service design at Lucerne University of Applied Arts and Sciences in Switzerland. In 1994, Andy co-founded the award-winning new media collective Anterum in London and worked with clients such as the BBC, the Science Museum, and Levi Strauss & Company, for which they won a D and AD Silver Pencil, as well exhibiting several interactive installations and performances around the world. Lavrans Lovely has worked as a design consultant since 1994. Before setting up Live Work in London with Chris Downs and Ben Reason, he worked as an interaction designer in Norway and Denmark. As a partner in Live Work, Lavrans has been lead designer on service innovation projects for Sony Ericsson, Sony, Aviva Norwich Union, the BBC, airport operator BAA, the Norwegian Knowledge Centre for Health Services, the UK Design Council, Orange, Vodafone, Mustad, FAST, the Interactive Institute in Sweden, as well as UK Regional Development Agency 1 Northeast. And Ben Reason is a co-founder of Live Work, and over the past 8 years has directed his passion for social impact projects into delivering successful change for the public sector. Ben has a background in design and innovation in network-enabled services with Razorfish and Oyster Partners, working with Orange, Vodafone, Nokia, Sony, Experian, and Oracle. Andy, Lavrans, and Ben are the authors, folks, of the brand new Rosenfeld Media book, Service Design. We are very excited to have them all with us today to present this webcast for you all. As we get things started, I'd like to go over a little housekeeping to help you get the most out of today's webcast. You'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for our speakers. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for our speakers, please be sure to preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that it's for them and we can make sure they see it for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you might need to give it permission to access your account. Our hashtag today is Service Design, all one word. If you should have any problems during the event, please take a look at your help widget. If you continue to have trouble, just post it in the group chat and one of our staff will help you right away. For choppy audio or stalled visuals, try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is close any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast, and we'll have the archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to our speakers for their presentation. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, thank you, Yasmina, and welcome to everyone here. It's kind of strange to not have you in front of me and say, wave your hands in the air, so you'll have to do that on Twitter or text. So I'm going to start, before Ben and Lavrans talk, I'm going to start and give a little introduction to service design. Now, some of you will know what it is, some of you don't, and talk about how products and services are different. And then I'm going to hand over to Lavrans, who's going to talk you through a case study and the kind of war stories, because that's really the best way to understand it, is to hear it, how it was put into practice. And then Ben is going to be doing more of the Q&A stuff at the end. So I'm going to be quite quick, and then I'll hand off to Lavrans. So I'm going to start with from products to services. And one of my favorite quotes, it's often attributed to Marshall McLuhan, but it's actually a guy called J.M. Colkin summed it up when summarizing Marshall McLuhan, which is, we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. At the rise of the Industrial Revolution and industrialization changed our relationships to products and changed our lives completely. The assembly line was an incredible invention, and obviously it did things like Ford democratized the car. It made the price of owning a car affordable to the average American. It gave us all the things we needed in our world for a quality of life. But once everyone's got a refrigerator, dishwasher, a car, and so forth, what's changed is that we don't really need more of these objects. We don't really need more chairs or lamps or objects. What we really need is working health services, working financial services, and so forth. One of the things that happened with industrialization is that it shapes the way we think about everything. So everything from education through to healthcare, through to a lot of things in our daily lives, including companies, was all about an assembly line approach, where prior to this, you'd have a group of craftsmen building a car, and those craftsmen could talk together. They could talk about how bits fit together. They could talk about how the experience of the driver of that car, because they're all there building one car, and then they're building another car, and so forth. As soon as you break it down into this assembly line model, it breaks things down into silos. So what you have is one person putting on a wheel every day, and that person doesn't speak to the other person further down who's putting on windscreen wipers or whatever it is. And so this became the dominant model of industrial thinking, of a top-down command and control structure where all the different parts of a company or an organization are divided into silos. So here's a simplified version. Management's at the top. There's management at the top of each of those silos, and as long as they report positive things back up to management, it doesn't matter whether there's absolutely no communication between those different silos. And on the right here, we've got customer service. And on an early version of this diagram, it said claims. And because for customer service, often it's the sort of minimum possible. Claims only happen when something's gone wrong. And so you've got this kind of siloed structure. And it's done very well. It's achieved a massive amount. But we're living in a kind of society that's changed. One of the things is, and a lot of these stats will be known to people working in service design, that 70 to 80%, I think it's more even in the States now, of developed nations' GDPs come from the services sector. Even in Germany, which is known as a sort of export worldmeister, people think of Germany exporting exquisitely machined machines all around the world, and including cars. The home nursing sector in Germany, it's called Pflegedienstleistung, is bigger than the entire automotive industry put together, just to put that into perspective. So we're living in a service economy, but we're thinking in a sort of product way. And one of the problems is this discrepancy with the silos model that is demonstrated here. You've got 80% of companies believe they offer a great service, and only 8% of their customers agree. So there's a massive, what Baines and company here called the delivery gap. There's a massive discrepancy between what people are actually experiencing and what companies think they're offering. One of the problems of this is because services are sold as products. So this is a well-known shop. Anyone from Germany or Switzerland will know this brand. It's a big kind of white goods and gadgets retailing store. And here you can buy power service, and you can buy it in a tin. The more famous example is probably AppleCare, which has a sort of price-to-weight ratio of equivalent to saffron, really. You buy AppleCare for several hundred, and you get a piece of paper. So part of this is a sort of marketing problem of working out how to sell services and fall back on, well, we're used to selling objects and products, so we'll sell it that way. And apart from it being kind of slightly amusing, the kind of hidden bit behind it is if I sell you a product, my relationship to you is over once I've sold you that product. In fact, the only time you ever come back to me is when something's gone wrong. That's the claims part of that silo diagram. And whereas services are really about ongoing relationships. So if you think of a lot of services are lifelong, in fact outlive us. So things like healthcare services, welfare, finance, insurance, telecommunications, and so forth. They're things that you expect to have a relationship with for the rest of your life. It's a very different relationship to just selling someone something and forgetting what that relationship is. And so that when you have services sold as if they're products, you get this problem where it's kind of sell it and forget. And so that means that a lot of organizations, for a lot of organizations, their customer service is the minimum they can get away with rather than seeing it as a return channel of value. So what happens is with products or single screen experiences, it kind of looks like this. We're used to, especially if you're working in UX or something like that, you might be used to thinking about really carefully crafting the screen experience, whether that's mobile or desktop. But actually services are experienced in ecology. They're experienced with other people. They're experienced in a multi-channel environment where all of these different aspects, all of these different channels form the experience of the service. They're not individual experiences. So in service design, what we often do is turn this model on its side to get this. And in this model, the customer journey is happening on the top, and it's unfolding over time. And then all the channels that could possibly that the customer could possibly come in contact are underneath, and they take a journey through all those channels. So, I take a holiday, take a plane journey. I have contact with print, people, mobile, and so forth, the aircraft itself, other customers. And in this model, management is a kind of foundation. Management is supporting that experience. So if you're working in one of these channels, so typically as a web designer, for example, you might be just working across one of those channels and really carefully trying to craft it and hopefully crafting it happening over time. This is just a very sort of quick sketch of a blueprint here. The question then is, who's designing all of the rest? And what you really want to make sure, and one of the sort of key things of service design, is to ensure that the service doesn't just happen because no one's bothered to design it. And what happens is no one actually takes care of designing it. Either it just happens, it's just a break in the service, or someone has to make decisions about things, and they have to make a decision that's detrimental to the experience of the service. So the idea for us is to try and create a coherent whole. This is much, much easier if you see it as an example. So I'm going to hand off to Lavrans now to talk about the case study. Lavrans, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. So most of you might not find insurance a horribly interesting topic. However, from a service design perspective, it is extremely interesting. First of all, everyone needs insurance. And secondly, it's a mix of very complex products. It also reaches customers through many channels, and customer experience is a key competitive factor. So I'm going to tell you about some of the work we have done in the insurance industry. The fundamental idea behind insurance is solidarity amongst each other. That's why they are called mutuals. You actually take responsibility for accidents that might happen for each other. It's a very social thing to be insured together. But the insurance industry has gone through a massive change over the last 20 to 30 years and has become industrialized. This is a great thing in terms of products getting better, in terms of bureaucracy becoming smaller. It's easier for customers to get in touch. However, the personal relationships that insurers used to have to customers were gone. So, in essence, what used to be a friendly chat with your insurance salesman turned into a race towards the lowest price. Aggregators online have taken over the relationship from the insurance companies, And customers have completely lost the idea that the quality of insurance can vary. For customers, it's simply about getting the lowest price. So this story is about one of our customers at Live Work, a Norwegian insurer called Gjensidige, who are the largest general insurer in Norway. They took the challenge of industrialization head on and thought about how can we really make sure we stay close to our customers. And one of the first things they did was to take their top 130 managers, sat them down for a day, and called 1,000 random customers to talk to them about what they felt about their company. This was a very important symbolic act, but also it meant that managers got back an experience they hadn't had for a decade. They actually spoke to real customers. So early on in our relationship with Gjensidige, they asked us, can you please help us look at our service completely from the outside in? And tell us, what would an ideal insurance service look like from a customer point of view if we could start afresh? The first thing we did was to go out and speak to customers. We gained a whole lot of very interesting insights about their thoughts about the insurance industry in general. And as a couple of examples, we learned a lot about how important trust is for an insurance relationship. When we ask people, do you know what you're insured for? They would say, yeah, we know pretty well what we're covered for. But when we asked to see their insurance papers, they could hardly find them. So in this example, she had it stored on top of the cabinet, and when we actually looked through it, we saw that there were papers from 2 years ago. So we realized most customers really didn't know what they were covered for. So usually the foundation of a trust in the customer relationship will be about the quality of the product, but for insurance, it's very much trust in that's experienced through the service. Another problem we found was that the insurance industry has developed an enormous array of products for their customers to narrow down on specific cases. And as one of their customers told us, why, when I look at life insurance, do I have to choose between dying from being hit by a truck or dying from cancer? Basically, the product structure has gone to such detail that customers get too confused to really buy what they need. Another incredibly important source for customer insight is customer-facing staff. So although the underwriters in an insurance company may know everything about how products should be structured, the people that talk to customers every day will be able to tell us what the customer's needs really are. So they gave us some incredibly interesting insights in terms of how one could deliver a better service. These are one of about 30 insights that generated the foundation for the project, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about how we went from insights to practice. The basic idea that came out of our insight was one about simplification. Is it possible to reduce the number of insurance products one might buy from 40 to 50 to 2 simple services? An insurance service that would insure me and my family, and an insurance service that would cover my things. So to start testing this idea with customers, we took all our insights and arranged them along a customer journey. We identified key customer touch points, the things that would really manifest the experience for customers, so that we could build scenarios and real experiences we could test with them. And then we tested the service idea in real life. We tested it with customer-facing staff. We tested it with customers online and on the phone. We tested it with retail environments. And we also wanted to test what it would be like if you actually had an accident. Now, we couldn't really simulate this by hitting someone with a truck, but we engaged with customers that had been through complex accidents and took them through what their experience would have been like if they'd bought this type of service. So to show you how we design these experience prototypes, I'll give you a few examples. First of all, this was a radical proposition, and we wanted to test what kind of expectations people would have and if they would understand the proposition. So we made newspaper advertisements and asked people, how would you react if you saw this in a newspaper? We also knew that a website would be incredibly important, and we knew that we had to really take advantage of the power of information visualization to make it work for customers. But rather than building a website, we put real insurance data into a big Excel spreadsheet and designed it to look like a website that we could test with customers. So in this way, we found a really, really quick and simple and dirty way to test an experience that might have taken months to produce if we'd done it in another way. We also knew that the experience of interacting with an insurance company very much took place in front of a website and on the phone at the same time. So we tested the dialogue between the call center and customers with our fake website and with real staff that would try to take people through the service with customers. So back to the first picture, your policy. A lot of customers also told us they wanted really, really simple contracts that they could understand. So we tested a one-page insurance contract with customers. We thought this would be a brilliant idea to really simplify it so it would be transparent and everyone would understand what they would be covered for. However, when we tested this with customers, they told us, one-page insurance contract, that really makes me feel a bit insecure. So we asked them, what do you think would be right? And they said, maybe about 7. So to conclude this prototype where we tested the experience across a series of touch points, it was really about testing the value proposition of this new service. And what they told us was they thought it was unusual. It was so far away from what they were used to, it took them some time to get their head around it. But when they got it, they really liked it and they were interested in it. So we understood it would take some effort to design it to be understandable enough, and it would require some very intelligent marketing to get people to understand it, but it would have a really great commercial potential. But there's another aspect of experience prototyping that is important, and that is that we tested it with staff who tried to deliver the service. And what that told us was that the business model was too challenging at the time. And this way of prototyping it by having staff trying to deliver it is incredibly important in terms of uncovering internal barriers to an innovation. But that was just the start. One of the things we learned is that over the last couple of years after we did this project, the context for this concept has changed, and it might now be possible to launch it under a different business model. But for our client, this was an example that went into a bigger picture. The CEO of the company decided to create a 2-year program called Extreme Customer Orientation, really to bring the customer experience to the forefront of everything they did. He got 2 of his key staff to leave their jobs as marketing director and brand director to be able to run this program from the inside of the business and out. Over a couple of years, they did 183 activities to improve the customer experience, and in some of these, they used service design as a tool to implement the change. So the point there is really, service design isn't the answer to everything that has to do with customer experience, but it can be a very important building block among other activities. So some of the examples of things we did. This is a service blueprint. It's basically an overview of a new service merging banking and insurance for young people. This type of overview of how channels and touchpoints work together, aligned with what the business needs to do backstage, gives a lot of clarity and a really great bird's eye view. And in this particular example, it helped the marketing department and the IT department have a much better conversation around how they could center their activities around what the customer needed, not around internal priorities. Gjensidige also used service design to package new services. This is a box, but it's not a product. But in this case, presenting it as a packaged box, as a product, was the right way to deliver the message around this service. Another area where service design can bring a lot of value is internally. We also worked with the call centers to find out how they could deliver better service to their customers. And in this example, it's where we helped Gjensidige or supported them in designing new call center standards and communicated it with staff. This is a particularly good example because the staff really wanted to help customers and get their questions answered quickly. But when we spoke to some of the call center staff, they said, rather than asking people for their customer number and what's happened to them, when we first asked them, how are you doing? It facilitated a much better dialogue. And Gjensidige used this insight to implement it as the standard. And the first thing they now ask people is, how are you doing? How is your family? It turns out the results are that customers calm down, they trust the person they're talking to, and calls are actually being completed quicker and with better results, both for the customers and for the company. Another aspect we worked on was staff system interfaces, so redesigning the CRM interfaces. Very often when an organization designs staff interfaces, it's very much to facilitate more efficient internal processes. But Gjensidige had a very strong point of view that they were there to facilitate great conversations with customers. So service design helped design those interfaces to enable the dialogue to be better, not only getting the right data there in front of staff. So the question is always there. How can service design help create better businesses? It's hard to make a precise business case, but we have a chapter in the book about it. But in Gjensidige's case, we're part of a much bigger program where they completed 183 activities to improve the customer experience. And they have seen a dramatic increase in the Norwegian Customer Satisfaction Index. This is an index that compares all the biggest brands in Norway and how they are rated in terms of customer satisfaction. For an insurance company who's in an industry where that suffers from lack of trust with customers in general, they have seen a dramatic rise, and they are now in the top 20, and they're number 2 in their industry. They also see that in terms of awards for best customer service, they started winning 2 years ago, and they are winning every year. So it's evidence from the outside that focusing on better designed customer service really has an effect. And of course, they can also see it on their internal metrics, which I can't share with you today. So that was a quick example of how an insurance company used service design to help facilitate a much better customer experience across channels, across touch points. In the book, we have several other examples, but I'll hand the phone over to Andy again to tell you more about what's in the book.
Hi, thanks, Lavrans. So we've kind of rushed through in a way. We kind of wanted to spend quite a lot of time doing the Q&A because I was just seeing some stuff come up. it's where we can go into a lot more detail and really kind of shape the talk based around what people actually want to know here. What I was going to do is just quickly run through kind of the structure of the book. Well, kind of the structure of the book. This is actually the chapter list here. And just so you get a sense of kind of what's in it. One of the kind of tricky things we had is, as you would have seen when we had a look right back at the blueprint here, I can bring it up again. You've got here we go. You've got, this is a tiny one, but you've got sort of multiple channels going on and lots of different steps happening over time. And obviously, this is a kind of a representation of one service within a much bigger organization. So you end up having kind of nested versions of these, if you like. You could pull all the way out and have a blueprint of an organization, and it could go all the way in to have a blueprint for a specific part of a service. And then all of that stuff has to be designed and mapped out. For example, for something like this that Lavrans was talking about. And I think one of the important things to say when we're saying service design doesn't do everything is we're not saying, come to us and we do everything, we design everything. Obviously, what you end up with is a lot of specifications, a lot of work. Sometimes it's done in-house. It depends on the service design agency. They have sort of different flavors. Some people have more digital skills in-house, some have more product design skills in-house, and so forth. It's commonly a sort of mixed disciplinary team, so we'll have real sociologists or ethnographers or psychologists working on that kind of insights research, or at least guiding it right the way through to obviously developers and designers of all flavors, as well as bumping up against change management issues and things like that. Because when you're creating a change like the one that Lavrans just described with Gjensidige, you're actually then triggering a whole load of organizational change. If you're talking about, saying, changing the incentives that call center staff have from sales figures to customer satisfaction ratings, that's a kind of big task. And it's really important for designers to turn their empathy lens in the other direction and not just champion the customer and user all the time. That's important. But actually think about what's it like for a manager or for someone who's got to report to stakeholders or shareholders to actually get some kind of change through in a massive organization and be empathetic upwards as well as downwards. So coming back to the book, in the book we spent a whole chapter talking in a lot of detail about the case study that Lavrans just talked about with Gjensidige. They were very kind and allowed us to talk about a lot of stuff. It's been, because a lot of this stuff's dealing with sort of strategy and innovation inside a company, it's actually quite hard to get people to be public about it, because that's their secret sauce. They sort of don't want to let it go. The second chapter talks about the nature of service design, kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, but in more detail. And the third chapter really talks about people and how fundamental people are and relationships are to services. The fourth chapter talks about research and different research methods. Some of them a lot of people will know, but some of them we've tried to sort of narrow it down to the ones that are more specific to service design and not just kind of human-centered design in general. And how can you turn that research into action? And chapters 5 and 6 really work on how you can map that out, how you map that into a blueprint, and how you develop this service proposition, the business proposition of a service. And then we talk a lot about prototyping and measuring services, and we end up with the book with a kind of look to the future to think of, where could this go and what are the challenges? Because obviously, especially with public services, or there's companies like Reboot doing work in developing countries, that stuff starts to get very, very complicated. These are the wicked problems, and we think the service design has some really useful methods and tools to deal with this. But obviously, it's not going to, we're not going to save the world, but we'd like to try and help. So we're going to kind of wrap up there on the sort of explanation stuff and our part of stuff, and we'd really like to open up the Q&A and also bring Ben in here to answer some of the Q&A. And I think the way we'll do it, we'll just have to shout out and say, yes, I'd like to take that question. Is that good with you, Ben?
That's fine with me.
Okay. So there you go. They didn't hear Ben. So Yasmina, do you want to moderate this? How would you like to?
Sure. Fantastic presentation, gentlemen. And as you can imagine, we have many questions that have come in. So we'll take them in the order they have come in, and we'll start with Lisa's question. She says, many service design projects do really affect and recommend change to the business model. Can you talk about managing that change required in organizations to adopt a new service design?
Ben?
Yes, I can. I think, Lavran, I'm going to try and talk about one of the Gjensidige projects, even though I didn't work on it. But the example Lavran gave with a bundled service that brought together some insurance and some current account banking for young people was a very good example of a concept which came from customers and on the surface seemed simple to us, and then when we started to work with the business, we realized that it required two parts of the organization that didn't really work together to come together. And what we had to do in that case was make a very compelling customer case, and that this would actually impact their end goal of selling these two services. And in the implementation, to find a way to get them to integrate. So what service design brought to it was to bring that holistic view of the two services together and the value of that. And then we had to work very hard to identify how those two things could come together, as someone else has asked, in the backstage. So we ended up doing a lot more of the work kind of like a iceberg below the surface with the organization to work out how they could integrate.
If I can add, I think it's a great question because we've found that change management almost always comes up because when you design a new service or redesign an existing one, it will affect the organization. It will affect people and their processes and systems, which is often very demanding for organizations as well. And I think it's a big question really in the service design community. How far do we go in terms of change management, and do we have the capability to do it? So I think it's a great question. I don't think the answer is clear, except that there is a requirement to be extremely aware of the demands you put on the organization after you've kind of defined the customer experience of the service.
And I'd just like to add, I mean, Levens and I, we had a conversation about this a while ago, and this is what I meant about turning our empathy skills in the other direction. It's kind of, there's a bit of a trend in a way for sort of designers to treat the sort of corporate organization as the sort of big evil thing that they're protecting, especially sort of UX and customer experience, for good reasons. You know, they're protecting the customer or end user from. And it's kind of tempting to go, why do you do it that way? You guys are idiots. Instead of going, wow, changing a structure of a 4,000 strong organization or 10,000 strong organization, that must be difficult. Tell us about it. And working from that kind of position, I think is a really important part of that process, because then you're kind of open to it and it's not just a fight.
Super. Thank you so much. We do have another question now from Teresa, and she is asking about the insurance example. She asks, was the service prototype a beta used as an alternative to the current insurance acquisition process, or was it mocked up for testing with recruited individuals?
It was mocked up and tested with recruited individuals. So this is very early prototyping, and I think we have found that we try to go out and really make the experience come alive extremely early in the process. We don't want to go a long way down the road designing what we think is a fantastic experience without really testing it with customers. So we use all the tricks in the books to try to simulate that experience as early as possible. So in this case, we tested with around 10 customers. We created scripts for what we wanted to test, and they were completely aware of what was going on. And we basically asked them to play the role of themselves and pretend it was real. The amazing thing is how easy it is for people to play that role and give us very, very real input about what's important and not. But they are in on the game, and it's early prototyping, and it really helps validate ideas very early in the process before you've made the big investments.
Thank you very much. We do have additional questions, and the next one is from Hans, and he would like to know, what are the supported processes in the blueprint? Are they in the backstage field?
Andy?
Yes, is the answer to that. And I kind of actually answered him in the chat a bit. There's a whole talk and workshop you could do on blueprinting alone, and the backstage processes traditionally, when you look at the kind of history of blueprinting, and we do talk. I'm sorry to keep saying this. We talk about it in the book in quite a lot of detail. There's this theatre metaphor of front stage, backstage, and typically the backstage stuff is the stuff that the audience, as in the user or customer, doesn't see. So there can be anything from staff in a call center, the stuff they work with, CRM systems and so forth, could be right down to a restaurant. You've got what's going on in the kitchen, the systems and services, any sort of technology that they're using, a huge range of stuff. In hospitals, there's a whole load of stuff that goes on backstage. There's even whole floors of hospitals that the customer, the patient, can't, never actually sees because they're unconscious when they're wheeled through those bits. So all that stuff is usually mapped as backstage processes in the blueprint. But the whole point of it is to see how those backstage processes align with the front stage touch points. So what the customer or user actually experiences, and how they support the experience you're trying to deliver to that customer. And so what sometimes happens is you see there's some kind of backstage process that's slow, or there's some kind of technological problem, IT problem early on, and actually the symptom of that problem arises somewhere later in the customer's journey. And if you don't map it out, you don't really see that there's that link there. It could be something to do with a delay in sending something out through some kind of automated mail-out system and so forth.
Andy, can I add to that?
Yeah.
So the other way to look at the relationship between that front stage and backstage is that you can actually define scenarios, as Lavrans described earlier, for the customer, and then look to the backstage to where it would impact. So we can look at the feasibility of making the new service experience that we think is desirable to customers, and what's the impact and the cost and the change to the organization. So it can work both ways. It can work with something existing that we're trying to improve, or something where we've got an idea of a new thing and we want to know how likely it is that we'll be able to achieve it.
I think there's that constant zooming in and out. So you can look at a blueprint of a service, either an existing one or one you're sort of innovating or creating. And you can think about what's the overall proposition, and if we shift that proposition, how does that kind of map out across the touch points, and what do we need to change in the details, and vice versa, as Ben said. If we change this one thing here, how does it affect the whole proposition?
Thank you so much. We do have lots of more questions coming again. Folks, keep them coming. We will take as many questions as we have time for. And now we will go to Alicia's question. She asks, how can designers make the transition into service design? Where can I get this job?
Who wants to answer that?
Please send us a CV at LiveWork. And the other speakers might disagree with me, but I have an industrial design education, and I've been working as an interaction designer for many years. And for a lot of our colleagues came from interaction design and really thought that the scope was narrow in terms of just being interface design. We started applying it to all the other disciplines. And then, of course, we've had this question, what makes a good service designer? And our simple conclusion is that you need to have a very strong synthesis muscle. You need to be able to deal with complexity and simplify it across quite a complex domain. And how do you train to do that? I think you just get into it and develop as far as you can possibly go.
I mean, I think there's a natural fit for people who've got user experience, customer experience kind of background. I mean, if you look at sort of the literature on service design, there's a whole thread coming from sort of management and marketing. And then from the sort of design side, there's a lot from product and product design and interaction design. And so there's a sort of, people have been doing product design, for example, I've noticed some people talking about Frog and a couple of others, and IDEO, of course. A lot of those human-centered design methods are really appropriate for, when I say appropriate, we've stolen them for service design, or reappropriated them for service design. So if you've got that kind of skill set already, that can be good. But equally, there's people who are, as I mentioned before, who've come through sociology, ethnography, psychology, business managers, and people like that who also have a role to play. And, as we're just talking about, change management people and so forth. I guess, Lavrens, you've got business designers now as well, right?
Yeah, I think when I started out talking about the design background, but I think what we're seeing as service design addresses more and more complex organizational problems is that we need service designers also with different backgrounds. So at Live Work, where Ben and I work, we have a couple of business designers with an MBA type and consulting background. And we see more and more that you really need to merge the understanding what goes on inside an organization with the understanding of what's important to customers. So I think that's the way we'll see the field grow.
Lavrens, I have a short answer to how to make the transition, which is find a friend who's with a business or a public administration background and spend some time with them trying to make sure that you can talk to each other. And and that will take you a big step. So that's it.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Next question from Mike. He asks, is there anything in the book that discusses tips for selling service design within a company? I have found many companies are resistant to holistic evaluation from internal staff.
Yes, there is, actually. And I think we talk about it, kind of talk about it throughout the book. I think we talk about it quite a lot in the measurement section, which is really looking at making the case for return on investment, really, in service design. And we also talk about it kind of really in the introduction as well. So I hope there's something in there. I mean, hopefully the whole book will help that.
Mike, I just recommend that you don't try and sell a holistic evaluation. Try and sell something a bit more pointed, that you say we can look at the experience, but we'll find the thing that is the real pain points or the real lost opportunity for the organisation, and we can this approach can focus in on something. I think holistic is very scary for anybody.
Yeah, and I think that goes back. Yeah, I think that goes back to the Gjensidige example as well, where the company, they did a fantastic thing and instigated this whole customer orientation program, and service design was one of many tools to address it. So the holistic approach really resides with the CEO and the top management. An important thing from a service design perspective is to find out which role to play within a holistic approach, if it exists.
Thank you very, very much. Just a couple more questions here. We have one from Jan. She says, do you discuss how to test the service design prior to implementation?
Can I start, Ben?
Yeah.
Great question, and yes, we do. And I think after 11 years of doing it, we see ourselves going quicker and quicker and quicker into testing. Basically, it means that we not only plan testing early in the project, but it's an integrated part of almost any project that we start with a client. There's hardly any project that doesn't involve testing with customers from very early on.
I think, yeah, it's worth saying that we see it as a sort of cyclical process. So it's to test and refine, and I think there's different examples in the book about different levels of fidelity of the test. So can you test in the first week of the project, and how quickly, and then what do you learn, and how do you take the test further and deeper? So it's, I do think it is a great subject.
Thank you. Another question here from Rafaela. She says, I'm curious to know whether you use current customers for testing and user research, or if you try and reach out to prospective customers also.
Okay, that's quite simple. It depends on the case. It depends on whether we're looking what the challenge is from the project. So are we looking at retaining existing customers, or are we looking at the ways that a new service can acquire customers? So that's in the design of what we're testing and the research that we need to do.
Thank you. Let's see here. A couple more questions coming in. Next one from Gail. What are the implications for implementing some of the needed change versus all needed change? I read a Business Week article about Audi yesterday. It apparently they implemented only pieces of the whole service design.
I'm going to go and search for that article. It looks really interesting.
Lavrans, do you want to talk about this in the context of Gjensidige, probably, if it makes sense?
Why don't you try, Andy?
Okay, well, I guess what I was going to say is because the case study in the book talks about, in the very, very first chapter, it talks about this process where it got to that's what Lavrans was saying before, when he said the proposal looks interesting and we'd like that, or it's unusual, that it got to a point where there was a fairly radical proposal on the table for a really different kind of insurance, which kind of really simplified everything. And it was kind of just too radical to kind of press the button and go, yes, do it. Because there's inside a big company that's both in terms of the market, where the company's at in the market, and where they are in their own kind of, where that organization is in its own kind of change process. However, a lot of the different parts, or a lot of the different insights rippled out into many smaller projects, and I can't remember how many there are now, Lavrans, can you? Change projects or things going on within the company, which kind of, I'm talking about a project that Lavrans knows about better than I actually, but they're kind of then lots of small changes, and actually then that's kind of shifted to a point where the big change could happen. Is that fair to say, Lavrans? I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, so I'm being a bit cagey.
Yeah.
Lavrans, can I jump?
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I think we all have to be careful in service design that we don't think that what we're designing is a product, and the way that people work is actually defined by a product approach. So the nature of products is that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you deliver something and it's done, which just isn't the case in services. So I think we all need to challenge that regularly and to think that actually there is no such thing as all the needed change. If you look at Amazon, they're constantly changing, they're constantly updating, and that we need that kind of a mindset. We are in a certain place now, and the company the service providing company is in a certain place now, and it wants to move forward. And part of the job of the designer is to help them decide which thing to do first and which thing to do next. And I think it's sort of quite dangerous to be disappointed, I suppose, if the whole thing hasn't happened.
I think it's better some change than none at all. You know, that sort of goes back to that question about the sort of holistic thing. You know, it's better to go, whoa, that's too much, but this bit we could do. And then we could do that other bit if we see that first bit worked okay. Then to them to go, no, forget this. This is never going to happen.
If you think about it, think of a service like your metro railway. We work with London Underground, and every day you're riding on it, and every day is an opportunity for the service to improve. So it doesn't. The good thing about services is the opportunity isn't lost when you don't necessarily take the whole thing, tool up, and start manufacturing it, and it's too late to make any changes. There are always opportunities to do something in life.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Dirk. Would you please elaborate on the particular issues encountered in designing services for businesses or professionals?
I guess that means like a B2B, a service to a business rather than a consumer. Let me just think for a minute. So the work, when we've done work that's a business-facing service, it's been very important to understand what the customer business is trying to achieve, which is often more complicated because there are, unlike a consumer service, there are very clearly a number of different actors. Maybe you actually have a number of different people who need to be involved in the buying and the usage of a service. So we just had a conversation today with a company where services were bought by IT and then used by engineering, but then they report into finance. So you need to have a multi-layered view of the customer, different actors on the customer side. I think is very key. And it's also often the case that that business and that service is integrating or working with other products and services. So understanding that kind of ecosystem, I think, becomes more important than, although it is important with consumers, it becomes more important. And if you don't understand those things, you will come across as naive. But on the other hand, I think there are some fantastic examples, because often in these sectors, the kind of good old-fashioned design qualities of usability and desirability and simplicity are really lacking. So there can be some very achievable improvements if you are willing to get into these kind of organizations.
Thank you very much. Oh, did you have anything additional to add to that one?
No, Brans?
Oh, I thought that was very well said.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, we'll take our final question now from Sarah, and another question regarding testing. She says, wondering about testing of the service design strategy concepts you came up with. Do you run one test with sample users to get feedback on the entire ecosystem, or different tests for different aspects and touch points?
I have part of an answer for this. Lawrence, shall I go?
Go for it.
Yeah. So one of the challenges for service design is you've got something, some kind of service which runs over a longer period of time. If we think healthcare, we've done quite a few projects about people who get ill and then live with an illness over time and then take some kind of treatment at a certain point in time. So the timescales can be quite long, and we've found that we've had to, with a strategic service concept, actually recruit and test with people who are at different stages of their life with an illness, and that there's fantastic insight to be had by doing that. So that's my first feedback on that. Also, we again, to my earlier point, we found we needed to test with different actors across the service. So if you, again, healthcare, we've got a patient, their family, their doctors and nurses, and then the If it's a strategic concept, also the kind of the hospital or the healthcare provider. So we've had to run some quite complex prototypes to get a rounded view on service design concepts like that.
To add to that, I think it's you start simple by identifying key issues and maybe testing just those issues qualitatively with a small number of customers, and then you can scale to larger prototypes and then on to pilots, real-life pilots. So in an example, we've been working with the public transport system in Oslo, been working on ticket machines, on onboard card readers, and on signage for subway stations. And there we have had people in testing sketch solutions, and then we've done particular target groups. So people that don't see well, people with different forms of handicaps to try these special cases. And then we've developed it so that, for instance, in one case, we dressed up a whole subway station with new signage and followed people for a month to get some quantitative data on how well things worked. So I think it's the whole range from very small and very targeted and very qualitative to large and quantitative.
It's a great question because it really sort of emphasizes this idea of designing for multi-channel services. You know, it's and the time aspect as well. The healthcare example is really good, and in insurance too. You obviously can't kind of force someone to have an accident, and in order to then see what happens, you know, when they see what it's like for them to make a claim. So you have to find someone who's and also you don't know when someone's going to have an accident, but you can find someone who's just had one or has just made a claim and get some important insights from them about the process. So instead of following one person on a sort of longitudinally through, you can we talk about this a bit as well. You know, you're looking at testing people at different stages of the service, and different people at different stages, and it's more about their behaviour and the moment in time they are in using the service than it is about a particular demographic.
Fantastic, gentlemen. With that, we will say a very big thank you to the three of you, to Andy, Lavrans, and Ben, for presenting a really outstanding webcast for us all today, for sharing all their knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yasmina.
To all the people that attended our event today, we say a big thank you to you as well, and we hope you've enjoyed the presentation and benefited from it. We would also like to say thank you to those of you that sent in your questions, because having those questions adds so much more to our event, so we thank you for that. We would like to let you all know that we did push out a code to you all, a discount code, as a thank you for attending our event today. So please, if you didn't open that group chat, do open it now. Some good information in there to save you some money on the brand new book, Service Design, that Andy, Lavrans, and Ben have written, and it's available today. You can get it at a great price. If you like what you've heard today and what you saw, and judging by your questions, you do. So we do encourage you to take advantage of the discount and get the book. It will definitely help you with your day-to-day. Again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude our webcast. Goodbye, everybody.